Hello, everyone. We're going to wait while everyone joins us, and then we're going to go ahead and get started with Lisa Black tonight. So, while we're waiting for people to join on, I just wanted to we'll get started with a little bit of housekeeping. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Library and Historical Society's virtual author series. Tonight, we are so honored to have New York Times bestselling author Lisa Black here to discuss her latest book, which comes out tomorrow, Not Who We Expected. It's the fourth book in the Carr Institute series. And it is fantastic. Before we get started, just remind everyone to please check out all of our exciting upcoming programs at hudsonlibrary.org. We have a ton of stuff coming up, both virtually and in person, and we'd love to have you back and join us. You could purchase copies of Not Who We Expected from our local independent bookstore, The Learned Owl, and I'll be putting the link in the chat below. You can also purchase any of Lisa's books from there as well. At any point during this event tonight, feel free, you can ask questions. Please leave them in the Q&A section and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Now, with all of that handled, let me introduce tonight's speaker. Lisa Black is a New York Times bestselling author of 17 suspense novels, or is that number
19 actually?
19?
Well, including the one coming out tomorrow.
I was trying to count on your site, including the Garner and Renner series, the Lockhart Institute series. Her works have been translated into 6 different languages, optioned for film, shortlisted for inaugural Sue Grafton Memorial Award in the Nero. She is a full-time certified latent print examiner and a certified crime scene analyst, and began her forensic career at the coroner's office in Cleveland, Ohio, which is a great local connection, and then the police department in Cape Coral, Florida, for much warmer weather. She has spoken to readers and writers at numerous conferences and has been a consultant for Crime TV and was the guest of honor at the 2021 Killer Nashville. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Lisa.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I will give you the Reader's Digest condensed version of how I came to this point in my life. And then we'll have plenty of time, I'm sure, for questions and answers. And how I became a writer, I always wrote as far back as I can remember. I'd write letters to my favorite cousin and I'd put little comic strips of us in it, putting us in our favorite TV shows. What you call fan fiction today, we didn't have a name for back then. It's just, I would put us in Batman and Star Trek, the original series, the old ones. But in high school, I went to Washington, D.C. and fell in love with the city, meaning I loved all the monuments and the marble and the buildings. And so I should have been an architect, but that involved math. So I'm like, well, I can't do that. So I majored in political science, which is something for which I have no aptitude whatsoever. Graduated with no marketable skills except typing and became a secretary for 10 years. I worked down in Playhouse Square in downtown Cleveland. I worked in the Hanna Building for the Benjamin Rose Institute, which is a gerontological institute. So I'm sitting in front of a word processor all day. I thought, what the heck, I'll write a novel. How hard can it be? Well, I wrote 6, all of which are chained up in my attic and should be for the good of humanity. And then I tried to sell them. I started to contact agents. I started to contact publishers. And so after the 6th book, I figured, well, this isn't working. So I went back to school at Cleveland State, which was about 2 blocks away from where I was working, to get a degree in biology, specifically to go into forensics. Because back then they didn't have forensic science degrees. They didn't even have forensic science courses. You got a degree in a natural science and the rest was just on the job training. So when a position opened up at the coroner's office, I got to work long hours for lousy pay in a, because Cuyahoga County salaries aren't the highest. with, in a badly ventilated building. This was the old coroner's office, about an hour's commute from my home, with bleeding, decomposing bodies and a slightly pathological boss. I was in heaven. I wasn't writing when I worked there. I didn't have time. I wasn't even reading except for textbooks and true crime, but I was experiencing. And this was pre-CSI, but post-Silence of the Lambs. So when I went to a party, people actually wanted to talk to me. They didn't, they weren't that interested in me when I was a personnel secretary. So, so that was, that was groundbreaking for me anyway. So I only got to work, it was my dream job. I only got to do it for about 4 years. And then my husband dragged me 1,400 miles away down to Florida. So suddenly I had no job, no friends, no family. I started writing again just to stay sane. I think it gave me something to focus on other than how miserable I was. And since I now had the forensic background, and the only thing I ever wanted to write was mysteries, it just made sense to apply the forensic perspective to telling the mystery story. Well, in the meantime, a little show called CSI had premiered. And my publisher picked me up, hoping I would be the next Patricia Cornwell, which, to everyone's disappointment, especially mine, I was not. But I had so kind of complicated story. You'd think once you get this first big publishing deal, you're set for life. Thank heavens I didn't quit my job. But for the second book, I thought, okay, America's probably had enough of serial killers killing beautiful young women. And I wrote something like different about this childhood rival of my protagonist. And she's now, grown woman with kids of her own, but one has just died, the infant, and her 15-year-old has disappeared. And wrote this whole thing. And the publisher said, nope, this won't do it all. We need you to throw it out and write something else. So I did, but by that point it got, behind in the production schedule. And then I wrote what was my third published book, Takeover, which was set at the Federal Reserve Bank in downtown Cleveland, which is directly across the street from the downtown branch of the Cleveland Public Library, which is where I spent a lot of time when I was a secretary, because I had an hour commute on a bus each way and an hour for lunch. So I did a lot of reading. So anyway, that was Takeover. And my agent said, I love it, but they're going to drop you. Even if they love the book, they're still going to drop you because the sales from the second book didn't increase over the first. So we basically just changed my name, changed all, the names of the characters, and she sold it to HarperCollins. And I was with them for four books. And then the 2000 financial crash occurred, and what we call the pubocalypse. It was kind of a perfect storm of the publishing world dealing with the ebook, which ebooks are wonderful, but when they first hit, society, publishers didn't know how to handle it, didn't know how to distribute, didn't know how to protect, didn't know what to charge. So it was pretty much chaos for a number of years, when publishers slashed their mid-list authors brutally. And so I got dropped. So the next 3 books, the rest of the Teresa McLean series, was with a British publisher, Severn House, which is great. And they do a lot more now. They're really publishing some, great stuff now. But at the time, they didn't allow bookstores to make returns. So bookstores would not carry my books at all. So, of course, sales plummeted. So then I was writing the last book in that series, in which Teresa McLean comes back from a late night call out in the middle of the night. She works at the coroner's office. She's a forensic scientist, no big surprise. And there should be 2 what we call deskmen on duty. They do the intake of, and they're there 24 hours. There's somebody there at the coroner's office, and there should be 2 on duty. And one is missing, and the other, she finds his body on the floor of the office with "confess" written in his blood over his head. And my agent said, I don't, my agent didn't like it. She said, I don't think it's suspenseful enough. And I said, she's walking around a morgue in the middle of the night by herself, looking for the killer who just murdered a coworker of hers. I don't think I can make it more suspenseful than that. I really don't. So, so I discussed, I threw it aside and I sat down and wrote 3 pages of what became that darkness. And with the opening scene of that darkness, where I thought, what if there's a man who takes the worst of the city's criminals, the kind that never get into court because they don't leave enough evidence, so they never get convicted. And he always does his homework. He's very careful to get the right person, and he doesn't enjoy killing. He's not a Dexter. He doesn't hate them. He knows they're just a product of their environment. So he sits them down and plies them with their favorite food and drink and listens to them. And when they're about as relaxed and happy as it's possible for them to get in this world, he puts 3 bullets in the back of their head. And this is all going because that to him is the responsible and humane thing to do. Well, this is going well until a forensic scientist picks up his trail, and then he's got quite the ethical dilemma. So I sent that to her, and she said, I love it, write the rest of it, which was great to hear, except I had no idea what was going to happen in the rest of it, except I thought, well, at some point, these 2 characters have to encounter each other. Other than that, I don't know what I'm going to do. So that became the Gardner and Renner series. And there are 6 books in that series. So then, once again, I tried to do something different, which, don't believe the whatever was it, when Wendy's or Hardee's or whatever commercial used to say different is good. Not in the publishing world. No, different is not good. So I had created this character that I thought would be like Jack Reacher if Jack Reacher was a 40-ish ex-housewife with no martial arts training. She would just go around, forced in early retirement. So she just goes around the country, visiting friends, taking temporary jobs, and of course, solving murders. And like Murder, She Wrote, but not cozy. And I wrote that up, and they said, no, don't like this. But you know what we'd really like? A jet-setting pathologist who works on cases of the rich and famous. And I'm like, okay, such a creature doesn't exist, right? I mean, pathologists belong to a county. They work for the county. They don't get to pick and choose what, interesting sounding things they like to do. It doesn't work like that. So I worked on it and came up with the Locard Institute. And the Locard Institute is 1/3 training for forensic people, cops, students, anybody who wants to go can attend. And because most of what we do in forensics is continuing education. We have, because there's so many different topics, and we're always taking different classes, and to keep up our certifications or whatever in different topics. If you're going to be adding a department or adding a new field of specialty at your job, you're going to be taking these continuing education. So it's like I'm really familiar with that world. So it's 1/3 the professors teach these classes, and then 1/3 research. These professors are all doing their own little research projects in the field of forensics, whether it's ballistics or DNA or document examination or entomology or whatever. Then it's 1/3 private cases, and that's the fun part, where they do get to travel around and work for the rich and famous, and the rich part helps to support the other 2/3 of the institute. So for the first time, usually when you're a writer, you write a book, and then the publisher likes it and you need to turn it into a series. This time I actually approached it as thinking, I need a lot of material. I need to set up a situation, so I have a lot of baggage, basically, and just a lot of avenues that my characters can go down. So I come from a huge family. So I made Ellie an orphan. She was orphaned at 4 when her mother was killed, and her father ran out. So she's been raised by these different aunts and uncles and a grandmother. And so she lived in a couple different states, got exposed to different professions, And they're a very close knit family. So it was a very loving childhood, but it was, it was a lot of moving around. And then Rachael is kind of the opposite. She had a very stable upbringing. She had a younger sister who was a little wild, the kid that's always in trouble. Well, the sister wound up, as an adult, wound up having a baby, and then like a year later getting killed in a drug deal gone wrong. They assume it was just she was in the wrong place, wrong time, hanging out with the wrong kind of guy, which she kind of had a habit of doing, even though she was very successful professionally, still had bad taste in men. So Rachael is raising her adorable little nephew, and she lives with her mom, so her mom can watch the baby when she's at work. And she loves the Locard. She's really helped to make it what it is. And the only concern in her life is the father of the boy, who's a deployed soldier, might come back and ask for custody, because he could legally do that, And he's actually a really nice guy. And I made him an army demolitions expert. So you can be sure I'm going to use that at some point down, down the road. Just like I use all of Ellie's relatives and extended family. One's a reporter, one is, you meet in the first book, Red Flags, is a researcher for a congressman, for a congressional committee, and she's married to like the most high-powered lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Another, Ellie's uncle, runs a security company. So I thought I have all this, this support and structure that I can create this world with. So that's where the Locard Institute comes in. And this most recent one, Not Who We Expected, what occurs in that, they're approached by an old of Rachel's sister who was killed, who we learn a lot more of that story, because just as with Ellie's mother's death, all is not as it appeared. So, but an old friend of hers is this rock star. Think like Mick Jagger. That huge of a rock star. And but his band broke up, and he, never really got big after, never really had a lot of success after that. So he's planning this comeback tour. Meanwhile, he hires the Locard to check on his daughter, his daughter is a sweet, sensible, according to him, 19-year-old who dropped out of Yale and went on for a summer to a career development program out on a ranch in Nevada, which sounds fine, a good thing to do, except she never came back. It's like a year and a half, and she's still there. And, he was keeping in touch, and he was hearing from her, and they were communicating, and it just got less and less and less. And then her boyfriend, who she went there with, turns up dead. And he gets very concerned and wants to hire the Locard to go check on her, but not let her know that he's checking on her, because he's trying to give her space. He knows he's not the greatest father in the world, but he's enough to know that she's had a crazy upbringing, and that, he wants her to know that he trusts her, and that, he wants to give her space to find herself. And kind of at the same time, he's really busy with this comeback tour, which is desperately important to him. In fact, you kind of wonder now and then what's more important to him. But so he hires them to check on her. So Ellie goes out to this ranch, more or less undercover, pretending that she's there for career development. And, Rachael is in Washington, D.C., kind of following up on that end. And so the book allowed me to explore one of my topics that fascinate me the most, which is cults. And I didn't want to make it a religious cult, because that's just been done to death. So I made it a combination of NXIVM and Scientology, where because that's basically what those two were. They were supposed to be for your career. They were supposed to be career development to make people successful and learn how to network and all these, good things, and wound up getting their hooks into people. So that's what I explore in Not Who We Expected. How are we doing on time?
We're
Okay.
doing good.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
We do, and I would encourage the audience to please, if you have any questions for Lisa, please submit them in the Q&A because we're going to try to get to as many as possible. But I have a few before we turn it over to the audience, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
I was telling Lisa before we got started, was familiar with some of her other books, but I just somehow did not read any in this little card series. Before the event, I was like, I'll read the first one so I can get a feel of how the series went. And then I just straight up binged all four. So I just couldn't stop reading them. It was such an easy, like such a exciting reading series to go into. And I loved how each book you got to learn a little bit more about our two main characters, Ellie and Rachael.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of questions about them that I feel like I have to stay tuned for future books to get answers to. But one of the things I loved about it was one, the level of research and detail that went into the books, which a lot of it comes from your background. Uh, when you're describing the different crime procedures that are going in, it just feels like I'm learning so much. And I was wondering also, it feels very grounded in like some in real life events, like you had mentioned. Your latest book, Not Who We Expected, deals with cults. The first one deals with online child safety in congressional committees. The third one deals with tech billionaires and government bids. I mean, it feels. I was just wondering, how do you get inspiration for some of these series? Like, where is your inspiration for the settings going into?
That's really kind of hard to say. um, you never know when you're a writer. You never know where your ideas come from, and it's different for every book. It's like with Not Who We Expected, I read The Road to Jonestown, actually, because I was judging the best fact crime contest for either Mystery Writers of America or International Thriller Writers. I've done both. And for that year, that was one of the books, and it just totally fascinated me. So that got me off on the cult angle. And like for Red Flags, I don't remember how I started because I originally, anyway, it started out with the baby disappearing and not have, had that kind of an idea. And I was originally going to have the nanny be Ellie's cousin and who calls her in to help her, because she's like, they're going to blame me on the nanny and, I'm nobody and they're filthy rich. So, but I eliminated the nanny and made the mother her cousin because I thought that's, a lot more visceral. And kind of modeled on the two sisters, her two cousins, kind of modeled on some childhood friends of mine, which I won't say any more about that. But because it's set in Washington, D.C., somehow I came up with the lobbyist idea, and how I got on children's online safety, I don't know, because I don't have kids. And I honestly, I think I just kind of picked that out of a hat and then really regretted it later because it is a huge, complicated, amorphous, continually changing and still changing topic. There's so much to it. I mean, there's privacy and but there's also, protection, and children have to be protected, not just from physical predators, but from data mining and unfair sales approaches and things like that. And I'm like, oh man, that was exhausting. And then I also vowed just not to write about children at all after that, because I mean, I would write scenes where she's going to pick up the little girl from school. And, you know, when I was a kid, you just walked out of school. Nobody paid attention to where you were going. That's how old I am. And all my friends are like, oh no. I mean, my agent, my sister who works at a school, she's a school nurse. Everybody's like, oh no, no, no. If you want to send somebody else to pick up your kid, you pretty much need an act of Congress to get that done. You know, it's not like, you know, oh, I'll send your aunt to pick you up today. No, doesn't work like that. So that was an eye opener. And then with The Deepest Kill, it's basic. I continually describe it as it's the Lacey Peterson case if Lacey Peterson's father was Bill Gates.
That's a perfect explanation.
Yes. So it's this young pregnant wife who disappears and then turns up dead. And the father-in-law, but in my book, her father-in-law is like one of the third richest man in the country and incredibly powerful because he controls most of the software, you know, just because of the, you know, the money and everything, and suspects his smarmy son-in-law. So that was where I came up with that idea. So you never really know where ideas come from. Sometimes they come with a setting. Basically, this recent one, Not Who We Expected, was because I went on vacation in Lake Tahoe and was out in really the desert for the first time in my life. I've never really, you know, been that far in that area of the west of the United States. I've flown to California and back, you know, but never been in the middle. So I'm like, this is really cool. I want to write about this.
Thank you. I am trying to think here. We have a few more questions, so please make sure to submit them in. And then there's a question in the chat, and I have a similar one. Save part of it. So I had mentioned I love the details about the book, and you're one of the highlights if you read the series. There's so many good twists and turns and red herrings as you go. A lot of times I was shocked by who the killer was, and then I was mad I missed out on clues and had to figure it out in hindsight. But I was wondering, when it comes to writing, I have two questions. One is, are you plotting all of this out? And the second one, like ahead of time, are you writing as you're going? Since you deal so much with crime scene investigating and that was your career, is there any professional like misconceptions that you're trying to address throughout the book? Because it's such a popular topic on TV. Is there any?
Oh, tons. Excuse me, getting over influenza.
Oh, goodness.
So, okay, now I've already forgotten your first part of your question. Oh, plotter and pantser.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find our writers are plotters, which means they plot the whole thing out, or pantsers. We call them that because they fly by the seat of their pants. And neither side understands how the other side can work like they do, but would like to try it, but can't. Like, and I'm a plotter. I have to know pretty much the whole book. I know how it's going to start. I know how it's going to end. I know who's going to get killed and why, and who's killing them, and the major clues that are going to guide her on the way, and little twists. And I don't do a formal outline. I swear every time I'm going to, you know, it's like, okay, I'm really going to do a detailed outline this time, so I don't have any problems. You know, you just sit down and write, because I always know where I'm going to go. And I'm getting worse instead of better when it comes to that. I have tried different methods. I've tried the index cards. I've tried a grid. I've tried diagrams. I've tried, nothing really works. I do jot down what I just call a sequence. It's like, this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. And then I often don't even look at it again, but it's all in my head. So, you know, that's how I write. And Myths, yes. I do purposely try to destroy things that on TV that are not real. My character you'll find them saying a lot, unlike what you see on TV. And especially probably the biggest one right now that you see constantly on television is that we have databases of every substance in the world known to man. Like you can take a smear of motor oil and say, oh, this is 30 weight, but made by, Pennzoil, and this is, where it's manufactured, and this is how many quarts they've sold in the area, and they sold 15 to this guy last Thursday in Palm Beach and have his driver's license photo. No, we do not. If somebody has a database of some kind of substance, then it's because that lab tech had a lot of time on their hands and they put it together. Now there are like between Canadian Mounted Police and the FBI, they did try and get a car paint database. The problem with any sort of manufactured item like that is that they change constantly, because manufacturers, perfect chemical consistency is not always their goal. It's their goal to have the same quality product for the most economical price that they can do. Like the very first trial I ever testified in Cleveland involved duct tape. And so my boss went out and got a bunch of duct tapes, and I compared them all. It's like what the fabric was, how many cotton and polyester, and how many threads this way and how many threads that way, and came up with the different manufacturers. They actually flew in like one of the heads of Anchor Hocking tape to testify about duct tape in this trial. And so I was telling him, everything we've done in this neat, survey basically that the FBI had put together. And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't really count on that too much, because if I get a better deal on fabric from the guy up the street, I mean, the factory up the street, as opposed to this factory that I bought it from last year, I'm going to go with that. So it might not be exactly the same from year to year. So this is the problem with databases like that. But I know they only have an hour. They've got to they've got to cut it down sometime. But that's why it's always some, boutique hand lotion that's only sold in one store in, Miami Beach or something. Well, if that's the case, why would it be in your database? They don't just magically appear. And manufacturers do not publish their formulas. This is how they make their living. They're not going to hand out their formula to every Tom, Dick, or Harry. And I mean, things like, I hate to disillusion anybody, but we're having so many drug overdoses, especially when fentanyl first hit the street, that the detectives were saying, can we quantify, what percent fentanyl, what percent baking soda, or what percent cocaine is in this mix, so that we can match it basically to the seller if we find the same composition on him. But we all learned that all crime labs or drug labs or just, medical testing will test, is this fentanyl? Is this heroin? They don't test the precise percentage of each. There's like 2 labs in the country that can do that, and it will cost quite a bit of money. So that was kind of an eye opener, So unfortunately, sometimes forensic science is not as miraculous as you think. Now, what is, to me, seems kind of miraculous is touch DNA, where you can just swab something that somebody touched. Like we always swab now the grips of the guns, because they're rough anyway. So you're not going to get fingerprints off them. So we swab them. We'll swab steering wheels of cars. And we had a case where it was a hit and run. And this, it was a dark morning, and there's still a lot of roads out here that are not really built up. So it can be dark out here. And she was in a dark hoodie, and she was kind of sitting on the edge of the road waiting for the bus. And a truck hit her and just kept going. And my coworker swabbed the bumper, and lo and behold, it came back with her DNA, which is really a complete shot in the dark because you can't see anything. There was no dent or anything. There was no blood. There was no bodily fluid. You're just hoping that there's something there, and it still worked. So contact DNA is kind of amazing.
I figured from reading your book that never or going into like the details on like the crime scene analysis and all of that, it's just so grounded in a way, especially compared to, I mean, like a show and stuff. I was like, I bet you she might be dealing with or trying to address some maybe common misconceptions that people might have on this.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I try and present it realistically. I think that's my job.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly exciting to read. I do. But I do have a few. I can jump into audience because I know we have a bunch of people writing in. Um, Mary would like to know, are any of your books inspired by any cases you've worked on? Or maybe to add on to any cases you know of people working on?
Only two, really. Trail of Blood was based on the torso killings in Cleveland during the 1930s. And it's about the only time I delve into like almost historical fiction, because I have a few scenes in the past with an officer at the time, a detective at the time, who was trying to a fictional detective who was trying to investigate the torso killings. And then but most of the book is the murders kind of start over again in present day, and Teresa, knowing her Cleveland history as she does, recognizes what's happening, that somebody is imitating the torso killings. And then Evidence of Murder was based on a case that I worked in Cleveland when I was at the coroner's office. We had a woman who was an escort who, sounds a little seedy, but she had a steady live-in boyfriend. She had a young daughter. She lived in a decent house in, Lakewood. And not the kind of person who would just go missing, but she did. And we always figured her last client killed her, who was no one she knew, no one she had a relationship with, had never met him before in her life. But we could never prove it, and we never found her body. So I kind of started with this idea of a married missing escort with a child. And then I was at the medical examiner's office down here attending an autopsy. And the investigator says to me, "Oh, I know the perfect way to kill somebody because it wouldn't leave any trace at all." He had actually written an article about it for the American Academy of Forensic Science Journal. And it was a case he had worked in Miami. So of course I said, "Tell me more." And that became Evidence of Murder.
Well, thank you. We had a couple people who wanted to know if you had written about any real life cases that you had worked on. Do you have to, because I know with the series ongoing, are you still, we have people, Jacqueline would like to know, do you still work in forensics?
Yes, I'm still working full time. I never quit the day job. I'm hoping to retire this year, but that's another whole story.
I say, because you're still working, you are up to date on all the latest tools and stuff that are being used. So that's exciting. All right. So if you're not, if you'd listed which ones you had worked on that are books that had covered real life cases, Susan would like to know, where do you go to research for your stories? Like, what process do you go through to research? Or what?
The library. I do usually start at the library, and I do a lot with audiobooks, which I can download from the library site. I love practically everything I do now is audiobooks because they're so convenient. You can do them at the at the same time you're getting other tedious, boring stuff out of the way, like exercising or cleaning house or doing laundry. So I do that. I do and then physical books, because of course the problem with audiobooks is sometimes you're not always somewhere where you can stop and write down notes. Do documentary videos, this free Amazon Prime videos. You can there's tons and tons of documentary videos out there on YouTube, and even TED Talks. It's like anything that's on my topic. Podcasts. I was actually for The Deepest Kill, because the character, I mean the software magnet kind of character, was promoting, I mean, he was going to be pitching the military with this missile defense system that he had developed the software to work with. And so I was actually listening to the Defense Contractors Podcast. This is exactly what it's called. If you want to sell something to the military, this is the podcast you want to listen to. And he'd go into the actual forms that you needed to fill out and everything else. So just research. I will research any and every way that I possibly can, but I usually always start with library books.
I mean, I think I'm biased here, but I think that's a good answer. They say that in a library. Um, we have a lot of people wanting to know a bit about your writing process, if you don't mind touching on that a bit. We touched
No.
upon like how you plot stuff out, which after years of talking to authors, I'm always flabbergasted when they answer that they're a pantser, and they're always just as surprised as I was who the killer was.
Yeah.
That just
I don't understand how that can work.
I don't understand it. I mean it works for them, but I
Yeah.
can't wrap my head around that concept that we're both surprised. Um, but a lot of people wanted to know, uh, can you talk a bit about your writing process? Do you have to write like at a certain time of day, particular setting, anything
No,
you have to?
no, I don't. My my process, if you can call it that, like I said, I'm always trying to improve it and not succeeding. Um, I'll just spend uh, a couple of months just kind of thinking about it. I mean, when I finish a book, I don't write. A lot of advice says, "Oh, you have to write every day." I've never done that. I don't write anything other than letters. I don't write anything in between books. So it'll be months. I'll just have, waiting for ideas to rattle around in my head or something like that. Or sometimes I'll already have a plan in mind, that I got while writing the last book. And then I do research. Then I'll spend, a month or two probably just researching and taking notes and everything like that. And then, all this time, I'm working out how I'm going to get from here to there. I mean, especially writing a mystery story, a lot of it is logistics. I mean, just you have to get your character from point A to point B, and they have to find piece of evidence C, but they can't just stumble on it. There's got to be a reason that they find it, and that they find, the significance of it. And then there's, twists. And so once I have all that pretty much worked out, and I get antsy is the only way to put it. I get like, I got to start this book. And so then I'll start writing. And usually once I do that, I get myself on a schedule. I decide it's varied over the years depending on my work schedule. Because my work schedule, for first it was Monday through Friday, and then we did every other week was 4/10s. But for a lot of my career, I've done writing at work. Don't tell anybody. Um, and so I'm not fussy at all about how how and where I write. I like to do it in the morning. I like to do it and get it out. But also now I'm on a rotating schedule. So I'm on 2 days, off 2 days, on 3 days, off, 3 days. So I have whole days at home when, my husband's working and I have the entire day. So I can get a lot done then. But also pretty much any opportunity, and especially now that I've gone to the iPad, which is so lightweight and handy and easy to use, with my little fold up keyboard. I've literally written a scene sitting on an overturned 5-gallon bucket in a supply closet, waiting for the manager to come and give us the password so I could download the surveillance video. So so yeah, I'm not fussy. I'll write in the car. Um, as I said, my only preference is mostly I like to do it in the morning so I can get it over with, and it won't be hanging over my head the rest of the day. And and so I continue on that, other than vacations and major holidays. I don't write on vacation because I've tried that. I take it with me. I don't want to do it, so I don't do it, and then I feel guilty because I'm not doing it. So I'm like, if I just don't take it with me, I'm fine. So no vacations. And so then, but the bad thing is, which is not good, I'm trying to battle, is once I start, I just want to get done. So I just keep writing and pushing myself until I get done. And then I'll send it to my sisters and have them read it. And I'll usually go through another draft or two until I can't stand it anymore. And then I send it off to my agent. And that's my writing process.
Well, you said you're not picky. You're writing in a supply closet. Definitely not very particular. Um, I'm trying to see here. Do you have, no, people in the chat are wanting to know, will there be another Lacard book, or do you have any cases bookmarked for future series or ideas that you have like down the line?
I'm honestly not sure about another Lacard book at this time. What I'm working on right now, which caught my attention, and I had to do it. I'm working on a book about an active shooter. Basically, it's an office building, just your average office building, and there's different things in it. There's a court reporters, which is why my character is there for a deposition. There's a dentist, an accountant, an architect, real estate. Just an ordinary little office building, and she's sitting in the waiting room and they hear a bang. So the whole rest of the book is pretty much her and these and he's trapped them in there. He's blocked the doors and turned off the elevator so they can't get out. It's too high to jump, and so they're trying to survive long enough for the police to be able to get through the barriers and get in to stop this guy, having no idea who he is, who he wants, why he's there, why he's doing this. So I'm going to have to put a trigger warning at the beginning of it, obviously, because unfortunately, there's too many people now who have personal experience with that.
Oh, sounds thrilling. The book idea, that is.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think here before we wrap stuff up. I just want to again say, I'll put the link again in the chat. Please make sure to check out Lisa's latest, all of her books, but especially the Lacard series and her latest one, Not Who We Expected. I cannot begin to tell you how quickly I couldn't, went through this book because I just couldn't put it down. The point where I was trying to get ready to go to work one day and I just was like, in between like packing up, I was like, I gotta figure out who's going where and what's going on. It was just one of the most, I just couldn't stop reading it. I've already recommended it to friends, so I'm excited for when it comes out tomorrow for them to pick it up and enjoy. Do you have any advice we'd like to know for any both future writers or future people looking to go into the field of forensics? Um,
Well, for writers, I always say read the best writers who are writing the kind of thing you want to write, and learn from them, see how they do things. Like for me, big eye openers were Tammy Hogue and Lisa Gardner. I'm like, this is what I need to do. It just suddenly it was clear as a bell. And for forensics, um, well, obviously, there are forensic courses and forensic science degrees now, so I would look into that. Visit crime labs in your area. Usually they will, ask if you can shadow them for a day. Just, call them up and ask. This is not strange. They're not going to think you're crazy. And, ask if you can just, come in, and even if you just go and talk to them for 20 minutes and get a little tour of the office, or if you can shadow them for a day. If you can do an internship, that's like the best thing. If you can do it on your own or through your school, or however, talk to your school's guidance counselors and see if there's any way they can set you up with an internship.
Sounds good. Thank you. Um, we had that question has come in multiple times, but I believe you just addressed it with some of your favorite authors. You have the ones you read.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Lisa Gardner is probably my favorite. Tess Gerritsen, um, I think who influenced me before I started writing the most is Alistair MacLean
Mm.
and P.D. James. And, then a lot of the Golden Age detectives like John Dixon Carr. Ellery Queen is my absolute favorite. And Niall Marsh, just all of them.
Well, I have one final question for you tonight, and I just want to thank you again so much, Lisa, for joining us this evening. Deb wanted to know, and I'm going to expand on it a bit. Do you have book, do you have a favorite book that you have written? And I would expand on it. Do you have a particular character? Because a lot of your books go back and forth between chapters, between characters. Do you have a favorite character to write or their point of view that you would enjoy?
Well, my my two favorite books are neck and neck. One is Takeover, which is the first book in the Teresa MacLean series, and the other is That Darkness, which is the first book in the Gardner and Renner series. And then, running a close second is What Harms You in the Low Card Institute series. I really, really liked that book. I liked how it all worked out. I liked just being at the Low Card Institute was so much fun. And the whole school thing to it. And Farida is just one of my favorite characters that I've ever created, I think. But for my favorite characters, it's Jack Renner, my killer, my homicide detective vigilante killer. He's wrong, but he's sincere, and I think that's why everyone liked him. And like I was being interviewed for that series about that series one time, and the interviewer said, "And so you're Maggie, the forensic specialist," and I said, "No, I'm Jack." I don't, I don't know. I don't know. I just identified with him so much.
It's a great series.
Not that I
Um,
kill people, you know.
Excellent clarifier. I want to thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute delight talking to you. Please make sure I put the link in the chat if you'd like to check out and purchase Lisa's latest book, Not Who We Expected. It's available at our local independent bookstore, The Learned Owl. They also carry all of her other books, so please make sure to check them out as well. And Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for the invitation. This was a lot of fun.
This was a pleasure. We hope to have you back sometime soon, maybe in person. But thank you all for joining us and have a great evening. Good night.